Hey, good day, everybody. Welcome back to Rocky Mountain Readings, where last week we broke into the new book, Noahides, The Road Toward a Meaningful Life, 38 Spiritual Lessons for a Purposeful and Righteous Life by Embracing the Seven Laws of Noah by Dr. Amnon Hever. And for those of you who are not familiar, Dr. Hever was born in Israel and has spent his adult life involved in education in Israel and abroad. He's the recipient of the Jerusalem Prize for Jewish Education. Dr. Hever served as the chair of the Department of History at Orat Israel College and headed the Israeli branch of the University of Alabama at Birmingham Master's Program in School Counseling and Educational Leadership. He was also granted he was also the director of the new Sanhedrin, where he was ordained and granted the title of rabbi. Excellent Jewish scholar for sure, and it's been a joy to get to know him and jump into this book. So we should be finished this by tomorrow, I'm sure, if we make some good ground today. So let's continue with where we left off yesterday, an introduction to the chronology of religions. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was given to man to work and to preserve. Upon Adam and Eve's expulsion from the Garden of Eden, they received 6 commandments from God, one of which was the belief in a supreme God. Upon Noah's exit from the ark after the flood, another commandment was added, the prohibition against eating the flesh of a live animal. In total, the world believed in 7 commandments that were named for Noah, who received the 7th and final one. As the years went by, people began to abandon the belief in God, and the first of those who rebelled against him was Nimrod, whose very name comes from the Hebrew word limrod, to rebel. How is it possible that even during the eras of Adam and Noah, not long after the creation of the world, people already began to abandon their faith in God and worship idols instead? The Rambam provides an explanation for this phenomenon. During the times of Enosh, mankind made a great mistake, and the wise men of that generation gave thoughtless counsel. Enosh himself was one of those who erred. Their mistake was as follows. They said God created stars and spheres with which to control the world. He placed them on high and treated them with honor, making them servants who minister before him. Accordingly, it is fitting to praise and glorify them and to treat them with honor. They perceived this will be the will of God, blessed be he, that they magnify and honor those whom he magnified and honored, just as a king desires that the servants who stand before him be honored. Indeed, doing so is an expression of honor to the king. That was their logic. After conceiving of this notion, they began to construct temples to the stars and offer sacrifices to them. They would praise and glorify them with words and prostrate themselves before them, because by doing so they would, according to their false conception, be fulfilling the will of God. That's how all idolatry errs. Always imagines it's fulfilling the will of God. This was the essence of the worship of false gods, and this was the rationale of those who worship them. They would not say that there is no other God except for this star. This message was conveyed by Jeremiah, who declared in chapter 10, verse 7 and 8, "Who will not fear you, King of the nations, for to you it is fitting. Among all the wise men of the nations and in all their kingdoms, there is none like you. They have one foolish and senseless notion. They conceive of their empty teachings as would, i.e., all know that you alone are God. Their foolish error consists of conceiving of this emptiness as your will." Forgive me. After many years passed, there arose people, false prophets, who told their nations that God had commanded them to say, "Serve this star, or all the stars, sacrifice to it, offer libations to it, build a temple for it, and make an image of it, so that all people, including the women, the children, and the common people, could bow to it." He would inform them of a form that he had conceived and tell them that this is the image of the particular star, claiming that this was revealed to him in a prophetic vision. In this manner, the people began to make images in temples, under trees, and on the tops of mountains and hills. People would gather together and bow down to them. And the false prophets would say, this image is the source of benefit or harm. It is appropriate to serve it and fear it. Their priests would tell them, this service will enable you to multiply and be successful. Do this and this, or do not do this and this. Subsequently, other deceivers arose and declared that specific star, sphere, or angel had spoken to them and commanded them, serve me in this manner. He would then relate a mode of service, telling them, do this, do not do this. Thus, these practices spread throughout the world. People would serve images with strange practices, one more distorted than the other, offer sacrifices to them, and bow down to them. As the years passed, God's glorious and awesome name was forgotten by the entire population. It was no longer part of their speech or thought, and they no longer knew him. Thus, all the common people, the women and the children, would know only the image of wood or stone in the temples of stone to which they were trained from their childhood to bow down and serve, and in whose name they swore. The wise men among them would think that there is no God other than the stars and spheres, for whose sake and in resemblance of which they had made these images. The eternal rock was not recognized or known by anyone in the world, with the exception of a few individuals, for example, Enoch, Methuselah, Noah, Shem, and Eber. The world continued in this fashion until the pillar of the world, the patriarch Abraham, was born. After this mighty man was weaned, he began to explore and think. Though he was a child, he began to think incessantly throughout the day and night, wondering how is it possible for the sphere to continue to revolve without having anyone controlling it? Who is causing it to revolve? Surely it does not cause itself to revolve. He had no teacher, nor was there anyone to inform him. Rather, he was mired in Ur-Kasdim among the foolish idolaters. His father, mother, and all the people around him were idol worshippers, and he would worship with them. However, his heart was exploring and gaining understanding. Ultimately, he appreciated the way of truth and understood the path of righteousness through his accurate comprehension. He realized that there was one God who controlled the sphere, and he created everything, and that there is no other God among all other entities. He knew that the entire world was making a mistake. What caused them to err was their service of the stars and images, which made them lose awareness of the truth. Abraham was 40 years old when he became aware of his Creator. When he recognized and knew him, he began to formulate replies to the inhabitants of Ur-Kasdim and debate with them, telling them that they were not following a proper path. He broke their idols and began to teach the people that it is fitting to serve only the God of the world. To him alone is it fitting to bow down, sacrifice, and offer libations, so that the people of the future generations would recognize him. Conversely, it is fitting to destroy and break all the images, lest all the people err concerning them, like those people who thought that there are no other gods besides these images. When he overcame them through the strength of his arguments, the king desired to kill him. He was saved through a miracle and left for Haran. There he began to call in a loud voice to all people and inform them that there is one God in the entire world, and it is proper to serve him. He would go out and call to the people, gathering them in city after city and country after country, until he came to the land of Canaan, proclaiming God and existence the entire time, as Genesis 21:33 states, and he called there in the name of the Lord, the eternal God. When the people would gather around him and ask him about his statements, he would explain them to each one of them according to their understanding, until they turned to the path of truth. Ultimately, thousands and myriads gathered around him. These are the men of the house of Abraham. He planted in their hearts this great fundamental principle, composed texts about it, and taught it to Isaac his son. Isaac also taught others and turned their hearts to God. He also taught Jacob and appointed him as a teacher. Jacob taught others and turned the hearts of all those who gathered around him to God. He also taught all of his children. He selected Levi and appointed him as the leader. He established him as the head of the academy to teach them the way of God and to observe the mitzvot of Abraham. Jacob commanded his sons that the leadership should not depart from the descendants of Levi, so that the teachings would not be forgotten. This concept proceeded and gathered strength among the descendants of Jacob and those who collected around them, until there became a nation within the world which knew God. When the Jews extended their stay in Egypt, however, they learned from the Egyptians deeds and began worshiping the stars as they did, with the exception of the tribe of Levi, who clung to the mitzvot of the patriarchs. The tribe of Levi never served false gods. Within a short time, the fundamental principle that Abraham had planted would have been uprooted, and the descendants of Jacob would have returned to the errors of the world and their crookedness. Because of God's love for us and to uphold the oath he made to Abraham, our patriarch, he brought forth Moses, our teacher, the master of all prophets, and sent him to redeem the Jews. After Moses, our teacher, prophesied and God chose Israel as his inheritance, he crowned them with mitzvot and informed them of the path to serve him, teaching them the judgment prescribed for idol worshippers and all those who stray after it. That's how faith in God became the near exclusive province of the descendants of Abraham, who continued to believe in one God even when the nations had strayed from the path. Things continued that way until the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, when God chose the children of Israel to be his people. This earth-shattering event took place in the presence of 3 million people who saw, heard, and experienced God at Mount Sinai. God gave the Torah to the Jews, while the Gentile nations were only obligated in the 7 Noahide laws. The giving of the Torah at Sinai is the absolute proof of the existence of God, who revealed himself to the Jewish nation. Christianity views itself as a monotheistic religion, but the actual practice of the Christian faith does not seem to align with that view. The foundations of Christianity are based on the belief in the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Add to that the widespread use of statues in Christian worship, and you will reach the conclusion that these forms of worship disqualify Christianity from the category of a monotheistic religion. Although in Christianity God has 3 facets that are identical in essence, each one has its own separate identity and stands alone. Islam is based on the belief in one God and his prophet Muhammad, and it is thus included in the category of monotheistic religions. Judaism believes in Maimonides' 13 principles of faith. The 13 principles of Jewish faith. Belief in the existence of the Creator, who is perfect in every manner of existence and is the primary cause of all that exists. 2. The belief in God's absolute and unparalleled unity. 3. The belief in God's non-corporeality, nor that he will be affected by any physical occurrences, such as movement or rest or dwelling. The belief in God's eternity. 5. The imperative to worship God exclusively and no foreign false gods. The belief that God communicates with man through prophecy. The belief that in the primacy of the prophecy of Moses, our teacher. The belief in the divine origin of the Torah. The belief in the immutability of the Torah. Belief in God, omniscience, and providence. The belief in the divine reward and retribution. The belief in the arrival of the Messiah and the Messianic era. And the belief in the resurrection of the dead. Those are the Rambam's 13 fundamentals of faith. Idol worship from biblical times to now. Biblical times, geographic conditions, and their impact on idol worship. The geographic conditions in every region played a significant role in shaping the image of the local gods, and Canaanite mythology was no exception. In the warm, dry, drought-afflicted climate of the land of Canaan, the thirst for rain engendered the development of a faith in which the god Baal was the god of rain and storms. Patron of agriculture, who waters the earth, He was declared the ruling god by the father of all gods, husband of the goddess of the earth Asherah. That's according to Canaanite mythology. After he defeated his brother Yam, god of the seas, and his underlings, the sea monsters, and is locked in a struggle with the god of death, who is responsible for drought and barrenness. He alternates between descending to the underworld and rising back up, a cycle that repeats itself over and over with the help of his virgin sister, goddess of water. With this mythological tale, ancient peoples who were primarily agricultural succeeded in providing a full, plausible explanation for the agricultural cycles and the phenomenon of drought that frequently plagued the land of Canaan. It also provided a way to control and manipulate these phenomena through proper worship of these deities to empower the good gods, namely Baal, Anat, Asherah, and Ashtaroth, and bring about prosperity. In contrast, the land of Egypt was not dependent on rain for irrigation, but on the Nile River. They equated the ebb and flow of the Nile with the death of the god of the dead, Osiris, who sometimes was embodied in the form of the god of storms, and rain, Baal, and his resurrection through his sister Isis. The motif of the death of a specific god and his resurrection is a common one among ancient cultures, and as in Canaanite culture, the chief deity who is killed by an evil deity is then saved and resurrected by a goddess who is also his sister. Sometimes a certain god takes center stage in a certain city and is considered the patron of that place, like the god of the moon Nana, who guards Ur-Kasdim, or Baal-Hadad, god of the storms or of the sun, which was worshipped in Bet Shemesh, which literally means house of the sun. Canaanite mythology. The deities in Canaan and the surrounding regions were many and varied. El, head of the Canaanite pantheon, he was considered the creator of the world and called supreme god. Asherah, goddess of earth and fertility, the worship of Asherah involved planting trees, illicit sexual relations, and ceremonial worship in temples built in her honor. Baal, god of storms, rain, and life, at especially difficult times, human sacrifices were offered to Baal. Ashtaroth, god of fertility and sexual desire, Baal's lover, her worship included cooking a kid's goats in its mother's milk, feeding pigeons, and ritual sexual relations. Shemesh, god of the sun, source of the gods, the Bible describes sun worship as bowing down to the sun towards the east. Chemosh, the central god of the Moabites. Milcom, also known as Molech, related to the Hebrew word Melech, or king, god of the Ammonites, worshipped by sacrificing babies or passing them through the flames of a bonfire. Teraphim, the household idols that resembled a human head. After offering them incense, one could commune with them and divine the future. Tammuz, Babylonian fertility god associated with the annual cycle of seasons and the growth of grain. In the summer, at the time when the crops have withered, fires would be lit inside the idol of Tammuz, which was made from metal and was hollow. It had eyes made of lead, which would melt from the heat of the flames, making it appear as though the god was crying. This ritual took place in the month of Tammuz, which approximately corresponds to the month of July, and the people would lament the death of the crops in the hot sun, summer sun. Buddhism. Buddhism is the fourth largest religion in the world, numbering over 5 million adherents, or about 7% of the world's population. It is the majority religion in Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. Buddhism is a dharmic or Indian religion. The word dharma implies a virtuous and upright way of living. The word Buddha means the awakened one who lived and taught in India. Buddhism is not found on monotheism, and it inspires the individual to develop prajna paramita, perfection of wisdom or perfection of transcendental wisdom through experimentation and dance. Japanese mythology. Japanese mythology refers to a collection of historical, mythological, and fabled writings which were recorded in the 8th century but were in existence much earlier than that. The mythological tales describe and explain customs relating to purity, agriculture, and the arts, stories which led to the deification of the Shinto religion, the way of the gods. This belief is founded on the assumption that everything in nature has kami, i.e. deities, divinities, spirits, or mythological, spiritual, and natural phenomena that are venerated in the Shinto religion. They can be elements of the landscape, the forces of nature, beings, and the qualities that these beings express, or the spirits of venerated dead people. In addition to idolatry, there are also local deities, historical stories that became consecrated, and spirits that appear in the folk tales. As a result, the number of deities in Japanese mythology is practically infinite. Here are a few examples of those deities. Okunishushi, god of the land, son of the god of storms. Izanagi, male deity in the story of creation, father of the sun goddess. Izanami, female deity in the story of creation. Amaterasu, goddess of the sun and the main goddess in the Japanese pantheon. She is depicted in the form of a female dog or wolf. Hinduism is based on a polytheistic perception of the world. In the view of Hinduism, the gods are seen as various revelations of the supreme essence known as the Brahman. The deities, which are generally considered central to Hinduism, are Brahma, Vishnu, Indra, Kali, and Shiva. Adherents to Hinduism believe in the philosophy espoused in the most ancient Hindu scripture, the Veda. The major philosophical underpinning of the religion is the theory that man's nature is divine, God is the Brahman, the spiritual essence that exists inside every single body. Veda is the search for self-recognition and spiritual independence. The Vedas profess that man does not need salvation and he is never doomed. In the worst case, man can live without awareness of his true nature and eternal guile. The Vedanta, end of the Vedas, recognizes that man can reach the divine in many different ways. Any legitimate method of spiritual practice can bring him to recognition of his true essence. The Vedanta preaches respect for all religions and encourages tolerance for other faiths. Major deities: Brahma, the creator, consort of Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge. Vishnu and his wife Parvati Sakti, power, goddess of life. Or Shakti, power, goddess of life. And Kali, god of death. So what's so terrible about idol worship? By Zvi Freeman. Forgive me, folks. I'm just getting lots of pings. Okay, so what's so terrible about idolatry? Question: why is Judaism so intolerant of idolatry? I don't mean massive temples with human sacrifices. What about a civilized idolater in the privacy of his own home, with a job, a family, a mortgage, donates to the Human World Hunger Fund and Greenpeace, and instead of one god, he just happens to have 2 or 3 or even several dozen, all lined up on the dashboard of his car? Why does Judaism make a cardinal sin of it, demanding total eradication of idolatry in every corner of the world? As long as it doesn't hurt anyone else, what's so terrible? The answer: there are many ways to answer this, but let's take a historical perspective. Historians agree that our ancient current standard of ethics stem from the Jewish ethic. Yes, the Greeks gave us the natural sciences, philosophy, and art. The Romans gave us governmental structure and engineering. From the Persians, we have poetry and astronomy. From the Chinese, paper, printing, gunpowder, acupuncture, and more, philosophy, and so on. But the historical fact is that all those cultures and all the other unmentioned cultures sustained and even glorified attitudes and behaviors that today we universally find abhorrent. Today, if you dispose of your unwanted infants, practice pederasty, set humans to kill each other for sport, ignore the rights of those lower than you on the social ladder, and refuse to acknowledge any social responsibility to the poor and the unhealthy, and can't wait to run to war against the nation next door, you are a barbarian. You may have made a wonderful citizen of Athens or Rome, but today no club will take you. Where did those values come from? There's only one source historians can point to, Torah, and the same for universal education and the idea of world peace. Now, this gives any scholar a meaty problem to solve. History is generally seen as something of a wild and diverse forest, where one thing grows from another. Seeds fall and sprout, trees branch out and flourish, and then fall and nurture mushrooms off their rotting wood. All the vegetation and creatures of the forest share the same air, water, and soil, and no creature exists alone. So, too, one civilization arises out of the mud, branches out, and falls to become the breeding ground of the next. Ideas move about in perpetual metamorphosis as they pass through the filters of variant cultures. Whatever is, was, and will eventually pass. All except for the Jews, entirely out of context with an ethic that had every nation calling them crazy and absurd. Ever radical, always out of step, definitely not part of this forest, and in the end, their ethic wins. There's got to be some explanation. First of all, where did they get these weird ideas? And telling me that the Almighty God snatched them out of slavery and dictated it all to them doesn't work. It's true, but it's not enough, because human beings can only hear that which they know already. There had to be something there from before. The classic answer is that once there was a man named Abraham from the Ur of Chaldees, the original seat of civilization. He came up with this standard through his own maverick genius. Of course, being ingenious, brave, and dissident wasn't enough. His task also demanded the tenacity and conviction to raise up a generation that would carry on this idea. Swimming upstream against all odds of the dominant society, and then over many ages, this ethic proved itself as the most effective backbone of a sustainable society. I don't think so. Now tell me, does any rational scholar really believe such a scenario? No. In fact, the version supported by the Talmud and described in detail by the Rambam is far more believable. The ethic that Abraham presented to the world had been there from the beginning. Humankind had originally known that each person bore the divine image, that life was with purpose, that the world was the work of a supernal entity that desired we take care of it and judged us accordingly. Even in Abraham's time, there endured lone individuals who preached this to their disciples as a tradition from Adam through Methuselah and Noah. But we are talking about human beings. Precisely due to that divine spark within, the human is also the wild and crazy creature that seeks out the most bizarre approach to life, ready and capable to do anything. So human society in general abandoned the original standard of Adam for that which feels good. Law became no more than a way for a king to govern his people. Ethics became no more than the custom that felt most comfortable to the most people. The only measure of the value of a human life was the degree of power a human held. And the natural world was understood as a worthless place, not worth any investment beyond that which produced food and power over others. Abraham didn't have to begin from scratch with humanity. He only had to rescue that original ethic. But he also rediscovered, and this he did on his own, the base that made the ethic sustainable: monotheism. More specifically, monotheistic providence. Simply put, every adult and child must know there is a single creator of all things who cares about what you are doing with his world. Why are monotheism and providence so essential? Again, back to history, according to the traditional Jewish sources. Abraham's predecessors had also known of the one God, creator of heaven and earth, but they understood God as far too sublime and transcendent to be occupied with this mundane world and its creatures. They began to chip away at his providence, asserting that lesser powers of his appointment had been granted a share of dominion. They went so far as to build temples where they focused their minds upon the dynamics of these forces, attaining spiritual heights and mystic power. Eventually, wisdom gave way to charlatanism, as priests told the masses that a certain star or god or goddess had spoken to them, commanding them to serve him or her in a certain fashion. Rulers found that a good mix of secret knowledge and convenient mythology could be an instrument of power over the populace. That by controlling the flow of knowledge, they were able to hold the people in awe and obedience. This is where Abraham dissented. He saw through the established order with its hierarchy of knowledge and power, and reasoned it to be the source of all evil. And he saw to the root of it. As long as God was up there and everything else was seen as lying on a descending plane further and further removed from his domain, this evil would continue. With such a paradigm, human life loses its essential value. You as an individual no longer count. All that matters is how high you are up on the scale. Not only human rights, but also the advance of technology is hindered by the need of the ruling class to keep the masses working. All progress is to further empower the powerful. Public health, welfare, and education are absurdities. So Abraham challenged that hierarchy. He taught each person to call on the name of the one God of the heavens and the earth, who judges the deeds of all men equally, from the highest king to the most lowly serf. By putting the original God back into the world, Abraham recreated the person, a human who is of value just by being there. With the old paradigm, ethics have no base to stand on. If you don't like what one God demands of you, you go find another God more to your taste. Or you work around these gods, tricking or bribing them, as they themselves are wont to do with one another. After all, none of them is supreme, none is all-powerful, therefore anything could be justified. So Abraham smashed the idols. Once there is only one God who supervises all things, morality is no longer relative. All ethics are determined not by the flux of social convenience, but by his intransient standard. Without Abraham's base to ethics, society has no stability. Any institution could be shaken to the ground by changing circumstance and the whims of human desire. In ancient Greece, the institution of marriage bordered on collapse due to their gender preference, while in Rome, the family unit was gradually dismantled by promiscuity. The institutions that should have nurtured human spirituality in many societies became corrupted into bloody orgies and worship of the senses. In many instances, such as in the Far East, poverty was allowed to grow to unmanageable proportions, while a select few amassed an immense concentration of power, all due to the void of a sense of social responsibility. In our day and age, with the origin of species attributed to the mystical gods of chance and natural law, the most horrid crimes against humanity were committed, and the very biosphere is now threatened. Only once the building blocks of society stand upon the solid ground of the one who created everything in the first place can a sustainable society develop. Very huge point. Truth be told, Abraham's message also began to perish with time. It wasn't until monotheistic providence transcended to the realm of ideas and became the real-life experience of a people that it was truly able to stick. And that is just what happened at Mount Sinai, when Abraham's descendants came face to face with marching orders directly from above. The concept of a mitzvah entered the world, something you do because God wants it done. And that basis has proven eternally resilient. As for the rest of the nations, as the Rambam writes, they were also commanded at Mount Sinai to keep the 7 mitzvahs of Adam and Noah, which included the prohibition against polytheism. Today we are witnessing the most dramatic results of Abraham's strategy in action. Our progress in the last 500 years to the point of the current empowerment of the consumer with technology and information only became possible through the rise of this ethic. In a polytheistic world, this could never have occurred. It was only once the people of Europe began actually reading the Bible and discussing what it had to say to them that the concept of human rights, social responsibility, the value of life, and eventually the ideal of world peace took a front seat in civilization's progress. And it is only such a world that could have developed public education and health care, old age pensions, telephones, fax machines, personal computers, the internet, environmental design, and nuclear disarmament. We are too much part of the flow to recognize this. The balance or the blanket of darkness that endures, fighting it to its last breath, preoccupies our mind. But if we could travel back in time and describe to the Jews of the past ages the world we have today, a world that values life, world peace, individual rights, freedom of expression, literacy, knowledge, and compassion for those who have less, that Jew would undoubtedly respond wide-eyed, "You mean it is the days of the Mashiach?" Prevailing beliefs in the way they're distributed amongst the world. Abraham, patriarch of the Jewish nation, from idol worship to monotheism. The patriarch Abraham, father of the Jewish nation, recognized the existence of one God, creator of the world, spread belief in God throughout the world, opposed the widely accepted heretical beliefs, and clung to God. The sages explained that he is called Abraham because the Hebrew, because the entire world was on one side and he was on the other side. The word Hebrew comes from the same root as the word for side, Ever. After God created the world, there were 20 generations that did not fulfill the world's purpose. And during those years, there was no righteous individual who spread knowledge of God in the world. After 20 generations, God saw Abraham, who was then in Babylonia, and he said, "Does he have the ability to publicize my name in the world?" When he was thrown into the fiery furnace and sanctified God's name and passed the test, God immediately drew him to the land of Israel. Then he built himself an inn and provided food for passerby, and he would bring people under the wings of the divine presence and teach them about God, and he dedicated himself to the honor of God. Midrash Bamidbar Rabbah 2. There were 10 generations from Noah to Abraham to teach us how patient God is, because all those generations angered him increasingly until Abraham came and received the rewards of them all. Tractate Avot 5:2. Abraham recognizes his creator. The patriarch Abraham grew up in a home of idol worship, in an environment where everyone believed in idols and worshiped them, and they were ruled by a high-handed King Nimrod. The sages teach that the name Nimrod comes from the Hebrew word limrod, to rebel, because Nimrod knew who the true creator was, and he intentionally rebelled against him. How did Abraham recognize the truth? How did he discover God? By searching for truth, Abraham's fierce desire to uncover and unvarnish truth led him to discover the true reality, even within the sea of falsehood that surrounded him. The sages say, in the morning when Abraham saw the sun rising in the east, he thought, that must be God, that is, the king who created me, and he prayed to the sun all that day. In the evening, when he saw the sun set and the moon rise, he said, well, this deity also must rule over the sun that I worship during the day, because he has overpowered him, and he prayed to the moon all night. In the morning he saw the darkness give way to light rising from the east. He said, all of these powers must have a king who rules over them and controls them. When God saw Abraham's desire to know, he revealed himself and he spoke to him, the Zohar says in 186:1. When the patriarch Abraham looked and examined and investigated and understood and engraved and cut and refined and created, and he succeeded in finding what he was seeking. Then the master of the universe, blessed be he, revealed himself to him and drew him close and kissed him on the head. And he called him my beloved, and he made a covenant with him and his descendants. That's at the end of Sefer Yetzirah. Abraham went to the study house of Shem and Aver to study Torah, and over the years he became incredibly wise in Torah, and he knew all of the Torah. Likewise, God made Abraham's 2 kidneys into 2 fonts of wisdom, and they would give him understanding, advise him, and teach him wisdom. That is, how Abraham knew and observed all the commandments, even the commandments that the sages established throughout the generations. Midrash Bereshit Rabbah 64:4, Tractate Yuma 28b, and Avot de Rabbi Nathan 32:1. The first test, the test of faith at Ur-Kasdim. Terah, father of Abraham, was an idol maker. Once he was away traveling, and he asked Abraham to sell his idols in his shop while he was gone. When a customer came to purchase an idol, Abraham would ask him, how old are you? And the man would reply, I'm 50 or 60 years old. Abraham would say to him, woe to this man who is 60 years old, yet he wishes to bow down to an idol that is 1 day old. The man would be ashamed and leave. Once a woman came with a bowl of fine flour, and she said to Abraham, take this and offer it to the idols. Abraham tried to convince her like he had convinced others, but she would not budge. She put down the bowl and left. What did Abraham do? He took a club, broke all the idols, and tied the club to the hand of the biggest idol. When Terah returned to his shop, he was shocked at what he saw. Who did this to them? He asked. Abraham cunningly replied, I will hide nothing from you, father. A woman came with a bowl of fine flour and told me to offer it to them. I gave it to them, and they began to argue. This one said, I'll eat first, and that one said, I'll eat first. Then the biggest one got up, took the stick, and smashed all of them. Terah was incensed, and he said, what are you mocking me? Why are you mocking me? Are they sentient at all? Abraham said to him, let your ears hear what your mouth speaks. His father was infuriated, and he took his son and handed him over to Nimrod. Nimrod told him, bow down to the fire. Abraham told him, if so, we should bow down to water, which overpowers fire and extinguishes it. Nimrod told him then, bow to water. Abraham said, if so, we should bow to the clouds, which can carry water. Nimrod told him, then bow to the clouds. Abraham replied, if so, we should bow to the wind, which disperses the clouds. Nimrod told him, bow to the wind. Abraham said, if so, we should bow to man, who can withstand the wind. Nimrod saw that Abraham was taunting him and said, you are a big talker. I only bow down to fire, and I will cast you into it. Let the God you bow down to come and save you. From Bereshit Rabbah 38:10. A call went out throughout the city. Anyone who is among Nimrod's followers should bring a load of wood to prepare the furnace for Abraham the rebel. The people amassed wood for 40 days, and they collected it in a certain village that afterwards came to be called Ur-Kasdim. In that village there was an enormous oven, and when they had gathered enough wood, they lit it and let it burn for 3 days and 3 nights. It was so scorching that all the people in the village were hot, and they ran away from the village. Tens of thousands of people gathered at the village, men and women from all over the world, to see how the rebel would be put to death. Among the audience were 45,000 princes, 80,000 warriors, and 60,000 sword bearers. One of the dignitaries was honored with casting Abraham into the fiery furnace. When he got a little closer to the fire, flames leapt out of the furnace and burned the dignitary. Other dignitaries tried to throw Abraham into the fire, but anyone who tried was immediately burned, until many people were burned and Nimrod didn't know what to do. The Sultan appeared in the form of one of the king's ministers, and he said that he had the power to throw Abraham into the furnace from a distance. He asked them to bring boards, ropes, and nails, and they fashioned a sort of weaving machine which is operated from a distance. They tested the machine 3 times by placing a large rock in it and tossing it into the fire. When the machine proved effective, they tied Abraham's hands and feet and placed him in the machine to throw him into the fire. The Sultan then came to Abraham and he said, "If you want to be saved from this fire, bow to Nimrod." Abraham replied, "God shall denounce you, O Sultan." Abraham's mother, who was named Amathli, came and he said, "Please, bow to Nimrod and save yourself." He said to her, "No, mother, that Nimrod's fire will eventually be extinguished, but the fire of hell will burn forever." And they flung Abraham into the fiery furnace. Instantly there was a great commotion in the heavens, and the angel Gabriel said to God, "Master of the universe, I will go descend and cool the fire and rescue the righteous Abraham from the fiery furnace." God told him, "I am singular in my world, and he is singular in his world, because he stands alone against the entire world. It is fitting for the singular to save the singular." Therefore God himself went down and he saved him. Tractate Peshahim 11:8. God cooled the fire, and Abraham was walking around inside the fire. When Nimrod saw that, he immediately gave orders to remove him from the fire. But no one could take him out, and anyone who attempted to get a little closer to the fire was immediately burned by the blazing heat. That's when Nimrod surrendered and cried out to Abraham, "You who are a loyal servant of the great God of heavens, blessed and true, come out." Abraham came out, and he stood before Nimrod, and the entire crowd that was there bowed before Abraham. Abraham said to them, "I am nothing, do not bow to me. Believe in the true God of the heavens." Nimrod gave Abraham many gifts, as well as his 2 choicest servants, one of whom was Eliezer. The other kings also gave him many gifts and accompanied him home with great honor. Midrash Haggadah, Genesis 12:1, Me'am Loaz. The second test, total faith. Go forth. And the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." And Abram went, and the Lord had spoken to him. And Abram took Sarah his wife and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had acquired, and the souls they had acquired in Haran. And they went to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. Genesis 12:1-5. While in Haran, Abraham gathered the people of the land and drew them close to the path of God. How did he do that? He would take 2 idols, tie them with a rope, and pull them through the city streets like a merchant and announce, "I wish to sell a useless idol. It has a mouth but cannot speak, eyes but it cannot see, ears but it cannot hear, and it cannot walk on its legs." Thus he engaged the locals in conversation and taught them that the path they were following was not the true path. And it is not fitting to worship idols, but only the true God of the world, creator of heaven and earth. And it is appropriate to destroy and smash all the idols. That's how Abraham taught many people the truth and brought them under the wings of the divine presence. The sages teach that the matriarch Sarah did her part as well, teaching the women and bringing them close to the path of God. The people of Haran were evil sinners, and Abraham assembled them several times, and he rebuked them. "Didn't you hear what happened to the generation of the flood before you? They did not pay attention and understand, and they were stubborn and rebelled against God's word. If God hadn't vowed not to bring another flood upon the world, it would be fitting for you to have a flood brought upon you." When God saw that the people of Haran did not accept Abraham's words, he said, "It is not fitting for the righteous one to sit amongst these wicked people." God immediately told Abraham, "Leave them so that you will not be similar to them." As the verse says, "Go forth from your land." Midrash Yalam Denu. A difficult test. Go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house. The reason for mentioning out of your land and from your birthplace, and from your father's house, is that it is difficult for a person to leave the country wherein he dwells, where he has his friends and his companions. This is true all the more if it be his native land, and all the more if his whole family is there. Hence it became necessary to tell Abraham that he should leave all for the sake of his love of the Holy One, blessed be he. That's by Noahides from Genesis 12:1. To the land I will show you, God did not reveal to him which land he was to travel to in order to increase the difficulty of the test. After all, do people go somewhere without knowing where? A person like that who goes without knowing where he is going finds the journey 7 times more difficult than the person who has a clearly defined destination. The patriarch Abraham took his belongings and his wife and wandered from place to place, like a lost sheep, until he arrived in the land of Canaan, where God told him to settle. Thus Abram merited multiple rewards. Not only did he receive a general reward for actually going, but he merited a separate reward for every step he took. But his steps were for the sake of heaven, to fulfill the command of God. Likewise, God did not reveal his destination to him so that he would eagerly anticipate his arrival in the chosen land, and the land would become more beloved to him. From Midrash Tanchuma Leka Leka 3, Noahides, Genesis 12:1, Midrash Bereshit Rabbah 39 commentaries. Abraham, the patriarch, was tested with 10 tests, and he passed them all, to tell us how beloved Abraham, the patriarch, was, from Tractate Avot 5:3. What were the 10 tests? Ur Kasdim, go forth from your land, the famine in the land of Canaan, Sarah's abduction by Pharaoh, Abraham was purchased by the 4 kings, or pursued by the 4 kings, the covenant between the parts, circumcision at the age of 99, Sarah's abduction by Abimelech, sending away Hagar and Ishmael, the binding of Isaac. Those are the 10 tests of Abraham. Shatter disastrous misconceptions. It is extremely difficult to break free from preconceived beliefs and misconceptions. For psychologists, sociologists, and anthropologists studying human behavioral sciences, the phenomenon known as belief or perseverance has been a fertile topic of research from the 19th century to the present day. Belief perseverance refers to the tendency to continue holding on to a mistaken belief despite new information that contradicts it. People simply cannot make decisions in a completely objective manner because there is always some level of bias within us, an inclination to make decisions that stem from preconceived beliefs or opinions. Scientists acknowledge that this bias, now commonly referred to as confirmation bias, constitutes a major obstacle that prevents individuals from making decisions free of personal bias. And what exactly is confirmation bias? It is the tendency we all have to seek, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms our prior beliefs or hypotheses, while giving disproportionately less attention to information that supports alternative possibilities. And that's just the way cognitive dissonance works. As a result, people tend to disregard evidence that contradicts their previously formed opinions, even if those opinions are not well grounded in factual evidence. This phenomena is so deeply ingrained in human behavior that it has suggested that it deserves to be considered as one of the fundamental laws of nature. In our Torah portion, we encounter for the first time the rare occurrence where preconceived beliefs are cast away. The Torah explicitly informs us that despite the inherent difficulty for humans to break free from these paradigms, it is possible to do so if 2 main conditions are met. 1, a willingness on the part of the individual or society to make significant efforts to consider new innovative ideas and detach from a destructive environment. Sadly, the environment's got to be destructive before people will consider change. Divine intervention. The more revolutionary the change, the more the divine intervention is necessary to guide humanity along the right path in this historical process. In this Torah portion, we learn that God chooses Abraham to take the lead in the first Torah recorded event of paradigm shattering. However, for this to succeed, Abraham is required to remove himself from the environment that prevented him from breaking free of these misconceptions. At the beginning of the Torah portion, God tells Abraham, "Go forth from your land, from your birthplace, and from your father's house to the land that I will show you," from Genesis 12:1. The Malbim, a prominent 19th century Bible commentary, explains, God told him that the purpose of leaving his land was to distance himself from their corrupt opinions and deeds, since a person acquires character traits and attributes. A, from his land through its climate and its natural tendencies. B, from his city or birthplace through its customs and behavior. And C, from his father's house. God instructed him that together with the physical departure, there should also be a mental departure, i.e., separation from the destructive temperament of his land, the customs of his birthplace, and even the love of his father's house. Indeed, after God's commandment to detach from this destructive environment, Abraham arrives in the land of Israel. In this fashion, he fulfilled the second condition that we listed. The Torah then relates that with God's guidance, Abraham began the arduous task of eradicating three misconceptions. Misconception 1, the land of Israel will remain permanently under the control of the Canaanites. In the story of Noah, we are told that after the flood, the nations that descended from Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, Japheth, began to settle and control their respective allotted portions in the land. However, regarding the descendants of Canaan, the son of Ham, we read, the border of the Canaanites stretched from Sidon toward Gerar as far as Gaza, down toward Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim, as far as Lasha, Genesis 10:19. This indicates that the Canaanites were busy conquering the land from Shem's descendants, despite the fact that the land was originally allotted to Shem when Noah divided the earth among his sons. Rashi on Genesis 12:6. Against this backdrop, Abraham walks through the land and indeed sees that the Canaanites were in the land. In spite of this situation, God appears to Abraham and says, "To your descendants I will give this land," from Genesis 12:6 and 7. God tells Abraham to internalize the following message, despite the current state of affairs. His descendants, the chosen nation, will inherit the land of Israel. Misconception 2. To maintain peace, we must compromise and relinquish full ownership of the entire land of Israel as part of peace treaties and other agreements. Abraham tries to maintain peace with his nephew Lot and Lot's entourage, who were not included in God's promise to Abraham, yet attempted to seize the land nonetheless. The Torah recounts, and there was strife between the herdsmen of Abraham's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock, and the Canaanites and the Perizzites were then dwelling in the land. So Abraham said to Lot, "Please, let there be no strife between me and you, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate yourself from me. If you go to the left, I will go to the right, and if you go to the right, I will go to the left." Lot chose for himself the entire plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they separated one man from his brother. Abraham dwelled in the land of Canaan, while Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, pitching his tents as far as Sodom. Genesis 13:5-12. Abraham's attempts to arrange for peace now and relinquish claim to parts of the land did not succeed. After the separation, God speaks firmly to Abraham. "Raise your eyes and look, for all the land that you see I will give to you and your descendants forever. Arise, walk through the land, its length, its breadth, for to you I will give it." Genesis 13, verses 14-17. Looking back over 3,000 years of Jewish history, we can rephrase this as follows. "Abraham, my son, perhaps you misunderstand. The entire land is yours and your descendants. Agreements with other nations will not help. Know that any attempt to bypass the divine promise will lead to wars and suffering on the personal and national level. This is not my personal commentary on God's message. The Torah makes it perfectly clear, because immediately after this dialogue, the Torah relates that a great war unfolds, an enormous regional conflict known as the war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. According to our sages, the intent of the 4 kings was to rebel against God, destroy Abraham's family, and seize the land. They brutally attacked the surrounding nations, including Sodom and Gomorrah, and captured the inhabitants of the city, including Lot and his family. Abraham was forced to launch a counterattack. He pursued them and succeeded in driving them out. He also succeeded in freeing the captives. After this great victory on the battlefield, Abraham's greatness was acknowledged, and he was honored as royalty. The Midrash related all the kings of the region cut cedars and built a large platform, placing him upon it and proclaiming before him, "You shall be king over us. You shall be our leader. You shall be like a god to us," from Genesis Rabbah 43:5. But some misconceptions are so ingrained that the true message only sinks in after some truly hard knocks. The Torah relates that despite this tumultuous event, which almost cost Abraham and his family their lives, Abraham again finds himself in a situation where he is offered a peace treaty by Abimelech, the king of Gerar. Note, biblical Gerar was a Philistine city whose remains are located near the modern Kibbutz Reim, which is near the border with the Gaza Strip. Kibbutz Reim was one of the settlements overrun by Hamas terrorists on October 7, 2024. Abraham agrees to this offer. Immediately after this covenant is done, we read in Genesis 22, verses 1 to 2, "And it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham, and he said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. And he said, Take now your son, your only one, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I will tell you." This juxtaposition cannot be overlooked, as it is not a coincidence that Abraham was put into a seemingly inconceivable test by God for no reason. Indeed, the biblical commentators Rashbam explains, every instance where it says after these things, it is connected to the section above it. Here, too, after these things refers to the events in which Abraham made a covenant with Abimelech. The wrath of the Holy One, blessed be he, was kindled over this, for the land of the Philistines is included within the borders of Israel, and God had commanded regarding them, "You shall let no soul live." Therefore God tested Abraham. He reproached and afflicted him. God said to Abraham, "You have grown prideful over the son I gave you, to the point of establishing a covenant between you and Abimelech's descendants. Now go and offer him your son as a burnt offering, and let us see what your covenant has achieved." Misconception 3. Historical events are governed by laws of astrology. Abraham was a firm believer in astrology. Like all the peoples of ancient Mesopotamia, everyone's daily routines and future plans, from kings and merchants to housewives and even the most humblest servants, were determined only after consulting the sages of the time or checking on their daily horoscope in the local newspaper. These sages, skilled in observing the stars and astronomical events, would predict the future based on celestial patterns. Even after shattering the first 2 conceptions and receiving God's promise that the son would be born to Sarah to continue his legacy, Abraham struggled to believe that God's promises would be fulfilled, because he was still trapped in another paradigm. He turned to God with the claim that, according to the stars, he would not father a son. As a result, we read, he took him outside and he said, "Look toward the heavens and count the stars if you are able to count them." And he said to him, "So shall your offspring be." Genesis 15, verse 5. God uprooted Abraham from his place and his perspective, placing him in a different position physically and mentally. That allowed him to understand that the shapes of the constellations held no true significance, and that Israel is not bound by astrology. One of Rashi's interpretations on this verse is worth noting. He took him out of the terrestrial realm and elevated him above the stars, which is why the term look implies looking downward from above. In other words, God's request for Abraham to look toward the heavens was not merely to glance upward in the physical sense, but also to contemplate the situation on a higher level. From a higher vantage point, one can discern the immense numbers of stars that are visible from Earth, and so the entire paradigm of astrology dissolves. After the shattering of the third misconception, the Torah informs us in the next verse that Abraham believed in the Lord. Genesis 15, verse 6. This is the first time in the Torah that we come across the concept of belief in God. Abraham is the first person in history to successfully complete God's lessons in the subject of conception shattering. Humanity has now ascended to the level of believers in God. And what about the people of Israel? There is a well-known saying by our sages, the deeds of the forefathers are a sign for the children. Will the people of Israel also need to undergo lessons in conception shattering? It seems that they will. Let us return to the verse mentioned earlier. He took him outside, and he said, look now toward the heavens and count the stars, if you can count them. And he said to him, so shall your offspring be. God informs Abraham that the descendants, the people of Israel, will find themselves in similar situations that require a new perspective on reality as part of their lessons in conception shattering. Will these lessons include dealing with wars, captives, and futile beliefs, in agreements with wicked nations full of hatred who seek to destroy us? Take notice that the sages said, the deeds of the forefathers are a sign for the children. They did not state the deeds of the forefathers are the deeds of the children. We are the children of the forefathers, and therefore their actions are embodied within us. We have the ability to learn from their deeds and internalize their messages. If we study their actions with careful contemplation, these messages will serve as signs, as warning posts, and we will not stray from the path. Listen to me, you who pursue righteousness, who seek the Lord, look to the rock from which you were hewn, and to the quarry from which you were dug. Look to Abraham your father, and to Sarah who bore you, for he was but one when I called him, and I blessed him, and I made him many. For the Lord will comfort Zion, he will comfort all their ruins, and he will make her wilderness like Eden, and her wasteland like the garden of the Lord. Joy and gladness will be found there, thanksgiving and the sound of song, from Isaiah 51, verse 3. I don't know, I think that might be a good place to stop for today. I'm just wondering, can I get to the end? I think so tomorrow. I think so. All right, so tomorrow should be our last day in this book, and we'll come back tomorrow and we'll continue with Between Jews and Gentiles. So hopefully you're enjoying this unique book, Noahides, The Road Toward a Meaningful Life, and I look forward to hearing Dr. Hever's explanation on how this summarizes for Noahides. Should be exciting. So join me tomorrow. We'll be back with Rocky Mountain Reading. So till then, have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody. Bye for now.